In this video, I will be reviewing the Evolution R255 MSDB. This is a dual beveling sliding miter saw that comes with a 10-inch multi-material cutting blade. And that blade is capable of cutting materials such as wood, plastics, non-ferrous metals such as aluminum and copper, and also it will cut mild steel. It is not recommended to cut hardened, high-carbon steel, galvanized, or stainless steel with the multi-material blade. Evolution does make a specific blade made to cut stainless steel, and in this video we will also be testing out one of those blades as well as an aluminum cutting blade. And before we go any further, I do want to point out that Evolution did send me this saw and the blades for the purpose of making this video. However, they did not pay me for this review, so this review is 100% my honest opinion on both the saw and the blades. And if you decide you want to purchase one of these saws for yourself, be sure and use the link that I've got down in the description of the video. That will take you straight to the Evolution webpage. Alright, so let's start out and take a closer look at the saw and some of its features. It is a miter saw and it will make miter cuts up to 50 degrees. It has this little locking knob here that allows you to lock it in place wherever you set it here on the scale. And it also has this little trigger here on the bottom, and that allows you to let it click into place at some of the more popular angled measurements that you might make with a miter saw, such as 15 degrees, 22.5, 31.6, and 45. And you just pull that little trigger and it just clicks into place and it locks in there when it is set at this specific angle measurement. This is a sliding miter saw. That means the head of the saw will slide out. It comes out about 9 inches, and it looks like, if I put a tape measure here, the maximum width I can cut is somewhere in the 11.5 to 11.75 inch range. We will test that out later in the video. And if we look here on the back of the saw, it has this little locking knob that will lock the slide into place. So if I don't want it to slide, I just tighten this down, and now the saw, the head, and the blade, and everything is all locked into place, and it will not move on me while I make the cut. And this saw is also a dual beveling saw. If I reach around here on the back and I loosen this little lever, it will allow me to tilt the saw up to a 45-degree angle either direction. But if I want to go to the right, I have to pull this little lever out right here, and now it will go 45 degrees the other direction. Another nice feature of the saw is that the rear fences can be slid out of the way when making bevel cuts. All you have to do is loosen the knob on the back and then slide the fence all the way over, and then that allows it to get out of the way when you're making a bevel cut. Another nice feature of this saw is that it has a depth stop right here on the side, and this allows you to control how deep the blade will cut into your workpiece, and this is great for making dados or slots in your workpiece. And the way that it works is you just flip this lever down like this, and you set your depth with this knob right here, and then when you go to make a cut, this prevents the saw from going any deeper. And then when you're done making your dado or slot or whatever it is you want to cut, you just flip this lever up out of the way, and then when you go to make your next cut, the saw will go to its maximum cut depth. And if you look here on the side of the saw, there's an extra on-off switch. This is for a laser. And when you turn it on, it projects a laser down onto the workpiece, and this will give you an idea of where the blade is going to make the cut. The saw does have a soft start, as well as a brake that will keep the blade from spinning after you've made your cut. The saw also comes with this little adapter that makes it easy to hook up your dust collection. This little bag that just clips on to the back that helps collect sawdust, and this hold down clamp. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but the saw does come with one of these orange multi-material cutting blades. And last but not least, right here on the back of the saw is a hex wrench, and this hex wrench will tighten and loosen most screws on the saw, including the one to change out a blade. Alright, so I've got the saw all set up and it's ready to start making some cuts. I do not have a miter saw stand, so what I have done is I have just clamped the saw down to my fab table with just 4 welding clamps. And remember, safety first. Always use the appropriate safety gear when making cuts, especially if you're going to be cutting metals, because I know from past experiences that the sawdust that flies off of a metal cut is much nastier than what you would get from a plastic or a wood cut. All right, so I'm going to start the cutting off with just a regular 2x6 here. Let's put it on here and see how well it will cut. All right, so there is the first cut. Brand new saw with a brand new blade. I think it did pretty good. There is some blowout right here, but I mean, any saw is going to do that. Next, let's try some hardwood. This is some white oak that I had left over from one of my projects a few years ago. Let's see how well it will cut. And a nice clean cut on the white oak. Next, let's try a piece of 4x4. This piece I've got isn't very long, so I'm using this hold down to keep it in place. And it didn't have any issues cutting that 4x4. All right, next I've got this old piece of pallet wood, and if you look right here, somebody's put 4 nails in the end of this. So let's try cutting a piece of wood with nails in it. No problems here. It cut right through that wood with the nails like it was nothing. Next up is another piece of white oak, but this one is pretty wide. Let's test out the sliding capability of this saw. And here is that wide piece of white oak. Did pretty good. Okay, next I have got a 2x4 up here, and I want to cut a dado in it, so I have the depth stop engaged. Let's see how well this works. All right, so if you look here, it did a pretty good job here on the front of cutting that dado in this wood. But if you look in the back, the blade doesn't go all the way through. So you can see the little round shape. That's the back of the blade, and it won't go back any further in the saw. So in order to make this work, I would have to put some type of sacrificial piece of wood behind the piece of wood that I want to cut. So that way the blade would go all the way through it, so I would get a nice clean dado. All right, let's move on to a different material. Let's try some plastic. I've got some 1-inch electrical conduit. Let's see how well it will cut. All right, so here is the electrical conduit. It did a pretty good job. If you look right here on the little piece that got cut off, there is a little burr, but I mean, that's nothing. That's excellent. Excellent job. All right, next I've got some UHMW. This is a slick plastic like nylon, and this is actually a scrap piece left over from where I cut out the intake on my mini jet boat. It is 10 3/4 inch wide, so let's see how well this will cut this plastic. All right, that's not bad at all. That made a nice, straight, clean cut in this UHMW. Okay, next up is some King color cord. This is plastic used by sign makers in CNC machines to make signs. This material, I'm not sure what it is. It's some type of plastic, but it is 11.5 inches wide. So this is pretty much almost at the limit of what they say this saw can handle. Let's see how well it cuts. All right, so here's the color core. It did a pretty good job making a nice clean cut. But if you look here, you can see there's a few little burrs sticking out here on the top. And like I said, I don't really know what this material is made out of. I just know it's some type of plastic. All right, next up is some type of foam. This is also used by sign makers and people with CNC machines. I believe some engineers use this to make prototypes. But like I said, I have no clue what this is. It is kind of soft. Not really sure. It's really light. It kind of feels like MDF, but it's really light. This is 8.5 inches wide by 2 inches thick. Let's just give this a go and see how well this saw will cut this material. All right, no surprises there. This is a very soft material, and it cut right through that like it was nothing. Okay, one thing has just occurred to me. This is a miter saw, and I have not made any miter cuts yet. So let's switch materials. I've moved over to steel, and I've got some really thin material here. This is from an old gate that I had here on the farm. Let's cut 245s in it and see how well it does. All right, so here are my 245s. It did a pretty good job. Let me set it on the table here. I don't think you can get much better than that, especially on 45-degree cut on round tubing. That did an excellent job right there. Okay, next I've got some 1-inch mild steel. This has an 1/8 of an inch thick wall, which is the limit for this saw for box section. Let's try this out and see how well it will cut. That's not bad at all right there. That's a nice clean cut on this mild steel. And since it is a miter saw, let's try 245s on this mild steel as well. All right, so here are the two cuts that I made. This was the first one, and then I made a second cut on the opposite end. And if you look right here, there is a little straggler, but I believe that was my fault. I don't believe I pushed the saw all the way through the workpiece when I made the cut. Let's make these two up and see how well they look. And here are my two pieces, and if you made these up, I mean, you just can't get any better cut than that. That's almost perfect. Okay, next I want to move on to some aluminum. And if you remember, I have a aluminum cutting blade that's made specifically to cut aluminum. But I want to also cut with the multi-material blade because they claim it can cut aluminum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one piece of aluminum with the multi-material blade and then cut the other end with the aluminum blade, and then let's see if we can tell any difference. So this is with the multi-material blade. And there's the piece that I just cut off with the multi-material blade. It did a pretty good job. Next up is some aluminum tube that has an 1/8 of an inch wall. Let's see how well it cuts. All right, so here's the piece of aluminum that I just cut off with this saw. you can see there is a little straggler, and it did leave that behind. I did push the saw all the way through. But one thing I want to point out is, if you can see this, maybe like right here, it kind of makes little dips into the cut. Like right here, it may be really hard to see on camera. Here's another one right here. But I'm kind of wondering if the aluminum blade will do this. And I looked at that angle that I just cut, and it also has these little dips in it. So it'd be I'm kind of curious to find out, to see if the aluminum blade does any better. Okay, so the aluminum blade is installed on the saw, and I've got this 1/8 inch thick piece of angled aluminum. Let's see how well this aluminum blade cuts aluminum. Okay, so here's the piece I just cut off. You can see there is one little straggler right here on the end. But if you look here, this is a much straighter cut. There's no little dips or anything. So on this angle iron, this aluminum angle, that aluminum blade does do a better job. And here's kind of proof that it does do a better job. This piece here is with the multi-blade. This cut here is with the aluminum blade. You can see the dips here in this cut that was done with the aluminum, or the multi-blade, and the aluminum blade is straight as an arrow. And here is the aluminum tube with the 1 inch thick wall. Let's see how well the aluminum blade does on this. And here's that piece that I just cut, and there is a little straggler here on this piece as well. But this is a much straighter and clean cut. This is with the aluminum blade, and this is with the multi-blade. And you can see here, if you look here on the back, you can see where it dips down right here. This has the same characteristics as that angle piece. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can see right here along the back where the camera's focusing in, you can tell that this also has that waviness that that angle piece did. And then here's the straight. But yeah, I can see like right here on the front, it's got a little waviness to it. But like I said, either one of these would work for any type of project that I'm doing. Either cut would work. It's just, if I'm going to be cutting a lot of aluminum, I'm going to want that aluminum cutting blade. Okay, so the only thing left to try out with the saw is some stainless steel. And if you remember at the beginning of the video, I told you I had a stainless steel blade because you cannot cut stainless steel with the multi-material blade. So I have installed the stainless steel blade into the saw, and I did some fishing, and I found this 2 inch piece of square tube. It has a 1/8 inch thick wall, and it is stainless steel. Let's see how well this saw will cut it. And that's what stainless steel looks like cut on this saw. With that stainless steel blade, it looks like it did a really good job. There's a little bit of burr right here, but other than that, that's pretty good for stainless steel. Okay, so we've gone through the list. We've done wood, we've done steel, we've done plastic, we've done aluminum. Let's go back to wood and let's make some bevel cuts and see how well this will make bevel cuts into wood. And there is a 45-degree bevel cut into an old piece of pallet wood, and it's still cutting mighty sharp and clean. All right, next let's try a combination bevel and miter cut. I've got it set to a 15-degree miter and a 15-degree bevel. Let's see how well it works. And there's what that combination looks like. We got a 15-degree miter and a 15-degree bevel. All right, so I've got the multi-material blade back in the saw, and I'm going to make one last cut. This is the piece of wood that I first cut brand new out of the box at the very beginning of the video. This side here is the first cut. Now I'm going to do a last cut, and then we're going to see if there's any difference in between the two cuts. And I want to cut right on the tip of that arrow, so I'm also going to try out the laser. All right, so I've got the laser turned on, and you can see I've got it lined up right with the tip of this arrow. And I don't know what's going on here because this laser is much brighter in person than what it appears on camera, but you can see it here on the camera. So if all goes well, my last cut will be right here on the tip of this arrow. Well, first off, I would say the laser is dead on accurate. You can see I got this cut right at the tip of the arrow, exactly where that laser was pointed at. So let's take a look here. This side was the first side that got cut out of the saw. This was the last cut out of the saw. And if you look here on top, right along here, it looks a little fuzzy. A lot cleaner here, but of course this was a brand new blade right out of the box, and we have done a lot of cutting right along here, done metal, plastic, aluminum, you name it, we've cut it. But overall, I would still say this is an excellent job for this multi-material blade. So this actually turned out to be a pretty decent saw. It cut everything that Evolution said that it would cut, and every cut that it made was a nice, sharp, and clean cut. And for somebody like me that works with a lot of different materials, this is a really good saw to have in the shop because one saw and one multi-material cutting blade can cut a wide variety of materials. Now, if you're going to be using this saw for a specific project, say an all aluminum project or stainless steel, I highly suggest that you spring for the extra blade because this did make much better cuts cutting aluminum with the aluminum blade than this multi-material blade did. But both blades did make a cut that was very satisfactory. I mean, either one of them would have worked if I was cutting pieces to weld, say, on my mini jet boat. And if you decide you want to purchase one of these saws for yourself, be sure and use the link that I have got down in the description of the video, and this will take you straight over to the Evolution website where you can purchase the saw or the blades. And if you like the video, please give me that big thumbs up. And if you aren't a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing that bell so you don't miss any upcoming Making Stuff videos. And thanks for watching.